Learning objectives. After completing this module, learners will be able to understand the nature of production in England before industrialization, understand and analyze the lives of workers during industrialization, understand and describe the impact of industrialization in England on its colonies, understand and analyze how foreign goods impacted the local Indian market, understand and explain the process of establishment of factories and role of Indian entrepreneurs, understand and describe peculiarities of industrial growth of India. Describe the importance of advertisements in the area of industrialization. Before the Industrial Revolution. In 17th and 18th centuries Europe, there was large-scale production for international market, but it was not factory-based. It was done by rural families working as peasants and artisans for the town merchants. This kind of industrialization is termed as proto-industrialization. The town merchants in cities faced stiff competition from powerful urban crafts and trade guilds enjoying exclusive rights to produce and trade in certain products. Scarcity of land in villages prompted poor peasants and artisans to work for these merchants for a small sum. The agricultural produce from countryside was turned into finished products in London and sold in international market. The coming up of the factory. Factories came up in England in 1730s, but the number of factories grew exponentially in the late 18th century. Numerous inventions in the 18th century improved the process of production, increased output per worker, and also improved the quality of yarn and threads. At this time, Richard Arkwright set up the cotton mill. Managing and supervising production under one roof in a mill was easier. By 1787, England's import of raw cotton reached a whopping 22 million pounds. The pace of industrial change. Other than cotton, England led in the export of steel. By 1873, Britain's iron and steel export was about 77 million pounds. Despite improved methods of production, textile largely remained confined to village households. Small innovations did improve the rate of production in traditional industries, but the new technology took long to become popular, acceptable, and affordable. Hand labour and steam power. In Victorian Britain, human labour was available in plenty and at low wages. Therefore, instead of investing in expensive machines, industrialists preferred hand labour, especially in the industries like gaswork, breweries, book binding, Christmas supplies, or repairing ships, where requirement of labour was seasonal in nature. The upper classes in Victorian Britain considered handmade goods superior to machine-made goods. Machines were preferred only for products requiring uniformity and mass production like uniforms, etc. Life of the workers. People in large numbers flocked to cities in search of employment. Those having some kith and kin working in a factory had better chances of employment. The job seekers had to spend nights under bridges or put up in night shelters. Night refuges set up by individuals or casual wards run by poor law authorities. Seasonality of work often forced many to return to countryside. Some would seek odd jobs to survive. Increase in wages in the early 19th century did not improve the income of the workers. A worker's income depended not only on the wages but also on the duration of his employment. Large-scale unemployment turned people against new technology. Spinning jenny, a machine introduced in the woolen industry, was attacked by women as they apprehended displacement from employment. The situation eased a little after 1840s, when activities like widening roads, laying drainage, sewers and railway lines, construction of railway station, etc., calling for more labor increased in cities. Industrialization in the colonies. The age of Indian textiles. Indian textile business was exceedingly prosperous till India became a British colony. Before mechanization of textiles, countries across the globe were producing coarse cotton. The finest variety came from India. Surat, Gujarat, linked India to Gulf and Red Sea port. Masulipatam on Coromandel coast and Hooghly, Bengal, were important ports linking India to Southeast Asian ports. Indian merchants and bankers directly dealt with the weavers and carried their products to the ports where they were bought by big export merchants. This network, however, collapsed by 1750s when the European companies gained ground, first through trade concessions and later by acquiring monopoly rights. The volume of trade at Surat port declined from 16 million in late 17th century to a mere 3 million by 1740s. While trade at Surat and Hooghly declined, it grew at Bombay and Calcutta ports, which were controlled by European powers. Most of the trading houses collapsed. The surviving trading houses had to function under the control of European companies. What happened to weavers? After establishing political control over Bengal and Carnatic in 1760s and 1770s, the British easily asserted monopoly rights over the textile trade in India. The company now tried to get direct hold over the weavers by appointing Gomastha, a paid servant, to supervise the weavers. It eliminated connection between the existing traders and brokers with the weavers. Next, they offered loans and advance to the weavers to produce cloth as per their demands. These weavers were not allowed to deal with any other trader. Those who faltered in supplying cloth in time were often ill-treated by the Gomasthas. The loan tied weavers to the company. They lost their freedom to deal with other traders, and the company paid a measly sum in return. Many started refusing loans and turned to agriculture again. Manchester comes to India. In the beginning of the 19th century, the cotton goods industry in England was expanding. Industrialists in Britain got import duties imposed on cotton textiles to be able to sell their products locally without any competition. They also persuaded the East India Company to sell their machine-made cloth in Indian markets. As a result, there was a decline in exports and loss of local market due to the availability of cheap Manchester cotton goods. Civil war in the US in 1860 disrupted supplies of good quality raw cotton to Britain. Britain obtained it from India, which caused a steep rise in the price of raw cotton. Weavers could not buy raw cotton to produce cloth locally. Indian factories added to their problems by selling their machine-made goods in the market. Factories come up. The early entrepreneurs. The first cotton mill in India was established in Bombay in 1854, followed by 4 more by 1862. The first jute mill was set up in Bengal in 1855. The Elgin Mill in Kanpur was set up in 1860s. Ahmedabad's first cotton mill came up a year later. By 1874, Madras's first spinning and weaving mill started production. In late 18th century, the British were exporting opium to China and importing tea for England from there. Indian businessmen who set up industries had initially aided the British in China trade by providing finance, procuring supplies and shipping consignments. Growing affluent, they established industries in India. Dwarkanath Tagore and Marwari businessman Seth Hukum Chand in Bengal and Parsis like Dinshaw Petit and Jamsetji Nusserwanji Tata in Bombay are some prominent businessmen who set up industries. Merchants in Madras traded with Burma, Middle East and East Africa. Though Indians financed and arranged capital for Indian industries, they had no say in decision-making. European managing agencies like Bird Hegler's and Company, Andrew Yule and Jardine Skinner made decisions regarding investments and capital. The European merchants and industrialists had their Chamber of Commerce, which did not allow membership to Indian businessmen. Where did the workers come from? Most of the workers in these industries came from neighboring districts and villages. Loss of hereditary occupations pushed them to industrial centers. Industrialists employed factory workers through a jobber who would source workers from his village. Jobbers often demanded money and gifts in return of favors done. The peculiarities of industrial growth. The European managing agencies primarily were interested in export trade. With this view, they bought land at cheap rates from the colonial government and raised tea and coffee plantations and invested in mining, jute and indigo. The coarse yarn produced in Indian factories was no competition to the imported variety pouring in from Britain. Swadeshi movement in the first decade of the 20th century strengthened the local industry as people boycotted imported cloth. In 1906, export of Indian yarn to China fell as the Chinese market was flooded with Chinese and Japanese goods. Hence, industrialists switched to production of cotton piece cloth. During the First World War, while British mills were manufacturing goods for the war, imports from Manchester fell drastically. Indian mills got a large market to cater to. It resurrected the local industry. Post-war, Manchester could never regain its old position in the Indian market. Small-scale industries predominate. After First World War, factory industries grew, but the country was still dominated by small-scale industries, particularly the handloom. The chief reason was quick adaptability of modern technologies and innovations by the handicraft people. Use of flying shuttle increased production without raising the cost. Weavers produced fine and coarse varieties of cloth. The coarse variety was purchased by the poor. Its demand fluctuated in times of bad harvest, but the demand for finer variety remained intact at all times. Expansion of the handloom sector, however, did not improve the condition of the weavers. Market for goods. The British manufacturers devised various ways to lure potential customers. Advertisement was one of them. Through advertisements, they attempted to make a product look desirable, necessary, and create a demand for it. Manchester industrialists used to put a label on their cloth bundles. The stamp of "Made in Manchester" was testimony enough of superior quality cloth. Labels also carried beautifully illustrated of images of gods and goddesses. It was done so that a product manufactured in a foreign land would get some Indian identity and appeal to the locals. By 19th century, calendars also became a means of advertisements. Poor or rich households or mediocre tea shops, calendar had a use everywhere. Even illiterates could use it. Anyone going through a calendar would necessarily glance at the advertisement also through the year. Again, the images of gods and goddesses were used on the calendars. Images of gods and goddesses, it was presumed, gave some kind of divine approval to the product. Other than religious figures, images of nawabs, emperors, or other important personalities also adorned the calendars. These images were meant to convey the superiority of the products because of their usage by the royalty. Their quality was not compromised at all. Indian manufacturers used advertisements to spread the nationalist message that show solidarity with the nation and buy Indian products. Advertisements did play a crucial role in spreading the nationalist message of Swadeshi. Summary. Let us summarize what we have learnt. In 17th and 18th centuries Europe, there was large-scale production for international market, but it was not factory-based. The number of factories grew exponentially in the late 18th century in England. Increase in wages in the early 19th century did not improve the income of workers. Indian textile business was exceedingly prosperous till India became a British colony. After establishing political control over Bengal and Carnatic in 1760s and 1770s, the British easily asserted monopoly rights over the textile trade in India. In the beginning of 19th century, the cotton goods industry in England was expanding. The first cotton mill in India was established in Bombay in 1854. The European managing agencies primarily were interested in export trade. After First World War, factory industries grew in India, but small-scale industries, particularly the handloom, still dominated the country. After World War I, Manchester could never regain its old position in the Indian market. Expansion of the handloom sector, however, did not improve the condition of the weavers. The British manufacturers devised various ways to lure potential customers. Advertisement was one of them.